The Democratic Party's paramilitary wing and voting-gathering machine, that would be the Black Lives Matter movement, is already responsible for quite a few innocent people being killed, in addition to untold amounts of property damage and irreparable societal damage. And despite its race-based creed, its terroristic leanings, and its collectivistic economic worldview, that group is still not evil enough to be regarded as a hate movement at the very least. What is evil enough to end up on the far left's hate maps? Well, peacefully protesting and peaceful assembly in the interests of white people. Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Now, a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine from Italy told me something that, as horrifying as it may sound, it is, nonetheless, a perfectly legitimate reaction to the never-ending mess that is now being exported from the United States onto Europe. He told me that the more leftists call him a racist, the more eager he is to identify himself as a racist, even though he isn't one. This diamond-cut diamond approach may indeed be the rhetorical equivalent of going nuclear on the far left, but what other choices are there? Let's read this. The Telegraph titles, "Campaigners to list White Lives Matter as a hate group." And goes like this, quote, "White Lives Matter, an organization set up in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protests, is to be listed as a race hate group by campaigners. The Southern Poverty Law Center said it will include the organization when it produces its hate map next February. I can't speak to how many chapters will be listed, but it's clear that the leadership of the group, the ends of the group, it's just a flat-out white supremacist group," Heidi Beirich, the director of the center's intelligence report, told the Houston Chronicle. "The ideology behind it, the racist leaders, everything about it is racist.
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out."
According to the center, one of the White Lives Matter's key activists is Rebecca Barnett. Her background, the rhetoric of the group, the hangers-on of the group are white supremacists, Ms. Beirich added. "The only question is how widespread they are and how many chapters there are." Ms. Barnett is listed on the website of the American White Supremacist National Socialist Movement's website as the head of its women's division. She also emerged as an organizer of a White Lives Matter rally in Buffalo, New York last month. White Lives Matter will be hosting an event for like-minded folk to gather peacefully and discuss the issues we face and work towards solutions to make it a greater, safer, whiter world for our future generations, wrote Rebecca Barnett, an NMSM member from Tennessee who helped organize the event. The Black Lives Matter protests started following a series of police shootings of unarmed African Americans, with some of the demonstrations ending in violence. So, is that it? Some demonstrations ended in violence? That is all the almighty Telegraph has to offer as a background information on the savagery and the degeneracy of the Black Lives Matter movement? Really? In any event, it may indeed be true that this Rebecca Barnett lady is indeed a white supremacist and a National Socialist. But that still doesn't change the fact that the SPLC and the associated network of cucks, degenerates, racists and self-loathing scum were very absent and remarkably silent when the whole BLM thing started unfolding. I mean, bitching and complaining about a minuscule group which has so far done exactly nothing wrong under the law, whilst at the same time ignoring the huge elephant in the room, is the kind of douchebaggery that we've come to expect from the fringes of the far left. You see, most people do not and will not gravitate towards a collectivist and racist worldview unless one works really hard to groom the public opinion for that. Turning a nation towards a supremacist worldview is indeed a process. I mean, it can't be done overnight, just like turning a nation away from that said worldview cannot also be done overnight. And this process I'm talking about involves endless chicanery and unreasonably often and blatant double standards that piss off even your most mild individual. I mean, heck, if you try hard enough, you'll eventually piss off even the cucks. The US, however, is still far from that, but if it comes to that point, it is game over. And it won't be game over for whites, that's for sure. Now, the good news in all of this is that the SPLC has suffered a huge blow in terms of its trustworthiness with the mainstream public when the FBI itself removed the organization from its list of advisors. The bad news, however, is that the SPLC still enjoys a rather privileged status with many government agencies and, of course, with the cathedral media. And that is in addition to being very well funded. However, the SPLC's biggest strength, its funding, can also be the SPLC's biggest flaw. I mean, once one looks carefully through the list of donors, one easily realizes that most of its donors do not follow the center's activity and are in fact old donors who tend to have a rather old-fashioned view of the center's activity. In other words, these are old liberals who, with great care, can be persuaded to stop writing checks for the SPLC. With the right agitprop, of course. Now, what I'm saying here is that it may indeed be time for non-leftards to start feeding the left with its own medicine. This is an opportunity to take divide and conquer right at the SPLC's doorstep. The leftists have already done half of the job for us by making the modern left to be everything about young, hipster, degenerate millennials and very little about everything that old liberals may have been concerned with. Your average young leftist in the United States already hates most old people, including old liberals, because those tend to be white, tend to be male, tend to be far more socially conservative than they are, and of course because they tend to have power and wealth, as opposed to young leftists who tend to be themselves exactly how they describe their opposition: basement-dwelling degenerates. As I'm sure you know, the left's primary skill is still projection. Now, with that said, articles exposing the SPLC's frauds and the fact that the organization definitely has nothing whatsoever to do with combating hate, if it ever had, have been written in the thousands, so I won't go through that, nor will I suggest writing another one of your own or anything of that sort. What I do suggest is to identify the donors and email them directly, as a concerned citizen. And slowly but surely persuade them to stop writing checks to these bigots. This has been done in the past, and it did shrink the revenue of the organization, but the problem is that whenever such attempt is being made, the group making it tends to stop after a few months. What I am suggesting is to never stop. Make it a habit of writing at least 2 letters per month, every month, and make it an objective of persuading at least 2 other people per year to do the same. I mean, it sounds modest, but most bold moves like these fail precisely because they start off with unreasonable goals. The point is that dismantling the progressive machine of hate is a process in and of itself. It's not going to happen overnight or even in a year. It takes a decade, at the very least. Or 2 decades, if we are to believe the late Andrew Breitbart, who warned us about the 2-decade gap between culture and politics. Anyway, this was the good word from the middle of nowhere where I'm right now, and with that being said, thank you all for your kind and continuous support, and I'll see you around on Freedom Alternative.